being the winningest coach in Arkansas Razorback football history exemplifies a level of success few people have achieved. But now, Coach Lou Holtz has taken on the fresh challenge of rebuilding the football program at the University of Minnesota.
But the big question I always ask myself is, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do up at the University of Minnesota? The first thing I'm going to do is buy a heater. I've never seen anything this cold in my life up there. Everybody in Minnesota has blonde hair and blue ears.
And now, with his own exceptional blend of perception and wit, here's Coach Lou Holtz's views on competition and success.
If you don't believe in your product and what you're doing and what you're involved with, you don't have a chance in this world to be success. People say, well, how'd you get to Minnesota? I feel like that guy down in Texas. Had that big, beautiful ranch and invited a group of dissidents out to show them how the better half live. But he didn't want any of them swimming in the swimming pool, so he filled it up with alligators. And he announced to them, he said, if any of you have the courage to dive in that pool and swim through those alligators, I'll give you any 3 wishes. I'll give you my daughter's hand in marriage, a deed to this ranch, or $1 million in cash. He didn't think anybody had the courage to do it. But he no sooner turned his back than he heard this splash. And for 22 minutes, the guy fought the alligators and finally emerged victoriously. And the owner of the ranch said, I didn't think anybody had the courage to do it. But to show you I'm a man of my word, I'll give you any 3 wishes. My daughter's hand in marriage, a deed to this ranch, or $1 million in cash. What's your wish? The guy said, I want to know who pushed me in that pool. That's how I feel many times. How'd I get here? I'd like to know who pushed me in. But once you're there, what are you going to do now? You're going to forget the past, believe in the product. If what you did yesterday looks big to you, you haven't done much today. And what are we going to do about competition? We're going to forget about competition because competition is us. What the people on the outside do has no bearing at all. Whether we're going to be successful or not depends upon what we do and how we perceive competition. We are in competition with ourselves. I mentioned the fact that we've lost by quite decisively, and I don't want to criticize the past, and I don't want to predict the future. But people say, well, gee, you play Nebraska next year, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Illinois. How'd you sleep when you read that? And I said, like a baby. Woke up every 2 hours and cried. You know, you get the competition and you can become awed and you become intimidated by it. But competition's ourselves, and it ought to bring out the best of what we are capable of doing. I know that I coached at Arkansas. We played Alabama for the national championship in the Sugar Bowl. And ladies and gentlemen, we played a great football game, but Alabama played a better one. And after the game, I walked over and shook Bear Bryant's hand and said, congratulations, Coach, your team played a great game. And Coach Bryant looked at me and he said, Lou, he said, I want you to know that's the best game we played in 5 years. And I said, gee, I'm glad I had a chance to see it. You know, you don't get that chance, but once every 5 years. It's just like sometimes we get to middle block, I can't do this. We can't do this. A prime example was at the College of William and Mary. We had the mental block, we could not beat the Naval Academy. Oh, we beat other schools that were better than the Naval Academy, but we could never beat the Naval Academy. This one particular year, I thought I'd convinced our players we could beat the Naval Academy. We were better than them. We went up there. I don't know if you've ever been in Victory Stadium in Annapolis, but it's a beautiful stadium, a double-deck stadium, and on the balcony of the second tier in big bold letters they have the words, Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, Saipan, Bataan. We're warming up, one of our players said, man, we can't beat these guys. I said, what do you mean we can't beat them? He said, well, look at the schedule they play. He said, you know. You get a mental block and I can't do something, but competition is really within ourselves. What are we going to do about competition? We're not going to worry about anybody else. We're going to make sure that we're doing the very best we can. We believe in the product. What are you going to do when you get knocked down? Because that happens to all of us. There isn't an individual that's ever achieved success that doesn't have a story about being knocked down, about getting up. Everybody's got that story. You have it here in this company. And you have a story yourself about times you've had to overcome obstacles and problems in order to be successful. Because it's not just one smooth ride to the top. What are you going to do now when you get knocked down? We had an All-American at Arkansas, a young man by the name of Billy Ray Smith. Great football player. He was an All-American not because he never got knocked down. He was an All-American because he wouldn't stay down. You knocked him down, he got up, took the shortest route to the ball carrier, and arrived there in a bad mood. Now, here's a great athlete. He played tennis by himself, and I found that impressive myself, but everybody gets knocked down. It's just part of life, but it's a question when you get up. I don't ask our athletes at the University of Minnesota how many want to win. And I'm not going to ask you how many of you want to be successful. Everybody wants to win. The question I ask is, can you live with losing? Can you live with failure? Can you live with mediocrity? Because if you can live with mediocrity or losing or failure, that is exactly what you're going to get out of life. A belief in yourself, a belief in what you're doing. But the fact that you've got to get up off the ground, I think, is ultra important. And anything you do, whether it be in business or whether it be involved in athletics. Next time you get down and you get depressed, I want you to remember a couple names. Remember the name of a young man by the name of Peter Gray, that played outfield for the St. Louis Browns with only one arm. Or Monty Stratton or Lou Brassie, who pitched in the major leagues with one leg. Or remember the name of Bob Altman, a young man that earned 2 letters at the University of Pennsylvania, 1 in wrestling, 1 in golf, and yet he was blind. Remember the name Jack Robertson, a paraplegic that came within 800 yards of swimming the English Channel. Or Bobby Morrow. Bobby Morrow at age 8 was a national poster boy for polio. All over the country his picture was seen on crutches and in braces. And yet in the 1956 Olympics, that same Bobby Morrow won 2 gold medals. So don't tell me about the problems you have. Don't tell me how tough this situation is. Because I'll show you, for every person you can show me that's had a tough time, I'll show you 10 that's really overcome obstacles and got up off that ground and achieved success. I'm a great believer in goal setting. Take a good look at me. You probably notice the following characteristics about me. I stand 5 feet 10, weigh 152 pounds, wear glasses, speak with a lisp, and have a physique that appears like I've been inflicted with beriberi scurvy most of my life. And you're saying, why in the world is that guy up here speaking to us? The only reason I can be here speaking to you is because I have been very much goal-oriented all my life. In the year 1966, I was an assistant football coach at South Carolina and got fired. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our 3rd child. I spent every cent we owned as a down payment on a house. I had car payments. I had mortgage payments. I have never been that depressed in my entire life. And it was in that setting, in that environment, I sat down and listed 106 things, as it turned out, that I wanted to do with my life. I'm happy to say I've achieved many of them. I've been on the Tonight Show a couple times. I've been to the White House for dinner. I've been to every continent in the world. I've played the 10 greatest golf courses in the world. I've landed on an aircraft carrier. But there are many things I haven't done in life. I've never made a hole-in-one. Closest I came was I made a bogey one time. I'm not a very good golfer, but I'm not a very good athlete. I was playing with Lee Trevino and the Danny Thomas last year, and on the 11th hole, I was faced with an 8-foot putt for birdie. And after I stroked the putt, I was then looking at a 10-foot putt for par. And it was embarrassing. I looked over at Lee and I said, how do you think I ought to play this putt? And he said, try to keep it low, which gives you a general... But there are a lot of things that I have not done, but goals are what cures boredom. If you're bored with life, you haven't set your goals high enough. Goals are what cause you to get up in the morning and go do the things that an average person won't do. Because an average person is basically lazy. You show me a successful person, I'll show you one that has a goal. See, 3 things happen to us. We either become intimidated, we become frustrated, or we become motivated. No matter what happens in our life, our reaction is going to be one of those 3. Intimidated, you do nothing. You stand around and you wait. Or you become frustrated. Frustration is nothing more than being exceptionally negative. Or you become motivated. I can't motivate you. Nobody can motivate you. We can only motivate ourselves. You have a goal, you have a drive, you have a dream. Give me an example. A guy was over in New York. He was on KP duty for 13 hours. Came off, they said, hey, John, let's go dance with the Fräuleins, drink some beer, and eat some pizza. He said, oh, no, man, I'm too tired. And he noticed there was a letter there from his girl. He opened up the letter, and he started to read it. The letter said, Dear John, that if I could just gaze into his big, beautiful, crystal blue eyes of yours one more time, if I could feel your strong, masculine arms embrace me just one more time, if I could taste your sweet, tender lips just one more time, I know I could continue to be true, but... All of a sudden, he wasn't tired anymore. He got up off that bed, went running off that military post, going to 100 in about 9.2. The guy on guard duty saw him coming, took the M14 rifle, aimed it at John's jugular vein, and said, Halter, I'm going to shoot. But John never even broke stride. But the last words he uttered were these. He said, my mother's in heaven, my father's in hell, my girl's in Chicago, and I'm going to see one of them tonight. That is motivation. That is feeling strongly about a cause, and boy, all of a sudden you have a goal, you have a dream, you have an ambition, you go do things that you wouldn't normally do. I think you've got to believe in people. Success doesn't just happen. Can you imagine walking up to the chairman of the board of the Ford company and say, how'd you get here? I don't know, just kept showing up to work and they kept promoting me. It doesn't happen. Life doesn't happen that way. Walking up to Sir Edmund after he scaled Mount Everest, say, how'd you get here? Say, I don't know. Went for a walk and here I am. Can you imagine going out and playing golf? Going out playing golf, hitting a drive right down the middle, picking up a 9-iron, hitting it right up on the green, and going up on the green, and there not being a hole there. There's no sense to the game. There's no sense to life without goals, without directions. Where you want to go. You say, yeah, but you're going to be disappointed, Coach, because nobody in America thinks you can win it next year. Doesn't bother me. Marconi came out and said, I have the theory that enables man to transmit sound through space. They committed him to the insane asylum. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb after 25,000 unsuccessful experiments. Abraham Lincoln, at age 32, lost his sweetheart with a nervous breakdown. He likewise had a nervous breakdown. Failed in business on 2 different occasions, went bankrupt, and lost something like 18 elections before he won one. You don't worry about the discouragement. The only way you can ever fail in this world is if you quit, if you give up. We're not winners. We're not losers. And we should believe in ourselves, but most folks don't. I happen to be an individual that had a very poor self-image. The reason I had a poor self-image were many and numerous. One of the reasons I thought was because of my looks. But I made a speech one time, and after I got done, a cute young lady about 26 years of age came up and said, well, Coach, I want you to know I think you're cute and sexy. And I said, why, thank you. I said, you know, I don't hear that very often. She said, well, I wouldn't think you would. But as I say, every day I get up and I've learned to like myself. You got to do it every day. You got to look at the good qualities you have, the good things you do. We were at the beach last summer, and I had on a bathing suit, and I have a lovely wife. I love her dearly. But she looked over at me, and she said, boy, you are skinny, aren't you? And I said, well, honey, I'd like to remind you that it was minor defects like that that kept me from getting a better wife. You know, if Then I used to think, well, it must be because I'm not very smart. This is a true fact. When I graduated from East Louisville, Ohio, I ranked 234 in a class of 278. Now, that didn't bother me, but it did upset me when the principal said it was a rather stupid class overall. And at the end of my senior year, the guidance counselor called me in and wanted to know if I was going to work in the steel mill or the pottery. And I said, oh, I'm going to go to Kent State University. She looked at me and she said, you don't have the background to succeed in college. And I said, you don't think I'm very smart, do you, Miss Sloan? I'll never forget what she said. She said, Lou Holtz, a lot of people don't know what's going on. She said, but you don't even suspect anything's going on. And that's really true, because I'm not very smart as an individual. But it isn't looks and it isn't intelligence. You know what raises our self-image more than anything else is we ask ourselves this question: am I doing the very best I can? If there's any doubt about what self-image can do to a young man's performance, I wish you could have been with us at the Orange Bowl about 6 years ago. We had to suspend 3 athletes that scored 75% of our touchdowns. In addition to that, we lost an All-American guard with a knee injury. Nobody in the world gave us a chance to win the football game. Why? Because all they read about were the people that weren't going to play in the game. Nobody ever wrote about the people that were going to play in the game. The players had a negative attitude, a lack of confidence, a lack of self-belief. You say, well, how'd you know that? Because they wouldn't look at me. You can tell when somebody doesn't have a belief in himself and in his future. They won't look at you in the eye. They won't laugh. They won't communicate. They become withdrawn and within. We had a meeting in a room somewhat similar to this. As the athletes came in, once again their head was down, and I said to them, I said, you know, it's ridiculous for you to believe you can't win the game. We were 24-point underdog, as I mentioned, and nobody gave us a chance. But I certainly had. I'd never done this before publicly. It was the first time I'd ever done this trick, and I said, you know, this like any other newspaper, you let what's in this newspaper determine the outcome of the game in your mind. I said you have the front page for people who want to read the news. You have the comics for people who can't read, and you have the editorial page for people who can't think. But I said, so many times we just have that faith and we have that belief that things aren't going to work out. Boy, when you do that, you truly undersell yourself. See, there's some things in this world that are just too good to be true. Like the daughter that wants to have a small wedding. The guy says, I'm from the IRS and I'm here to help you. Well, it is too good to be true that we have a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous challenge. When you're faced with a conflict, with a tremendous opportunity, look at it in that vein. You have a chance to rise above the average man. And any time we get a chance to rise above the average man, we ought to take that opportunity. Because really and truly, it doesn't come along every single day. Now, when you believe it, well, everybody said, how'd you do that? I'd like to tell you briefly how I did that. Perfectly, I thought. But in any event, it's not really important. But I wish that when I did that, I wished I could have said I got a response, but I got absolutely none. There wasn't any laughter, wasn't any applause, wasn't anything. And then I said, you know, I can tell you all the reasons why we can be successful. Same reasons I can tell you why you're going to be successful. So I said to the squad, you haven't listened to anything I've said thus far. You probably won't listen to anything else. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get up and we're going to go around this room. I want everybody here to tell me why we can be successful. You give me the reasons why. And I said, we're not going to leave until you do so. As they get up, they started pointing out that we did have a great defense intact. It was the #1 defense in the country. We did have a great place kicker. We did have an outstanding punter. We had a good offensive line. And Roland Sales, a young man that ended up gaining 206 yards in the game, but had never gained 100 yards in a game in his life, got up and said, I could have gained 1,000 yards if Coach Holtz had given me the ball. Well, that isn't really what I wanted to hear at that time. I wanted them to point out we had a great coach, but they've never said that to this day. But he went on to say the reason is because we have a great offensive line, and anybody could gain yardage behind it. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 nights later in the Orange Bowl, our offensive line had never blocked that well before, and they haven't blocked that well since. The Rolling Sales gained 206 yards, and we won the football game, which is not really important. But what is important is that wasn't a game of a coach winning a game or even contributing to it. It was just a question of a group of young men finally learning to believe in themselves and believe in one another and believe in their future and what they're doing. Boy, it's just one of the great feelings you can have in this world is when you get that feeling inside, I am going to be successful because I'm going to do the best I can. The one thing that we all have in common, winners and losers, is time. We all have 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours to a day, etc. The difference is how we're going to spend that time. We're going to spend it constructively, positively, believing in ourselves, helping other people, making sure people can trust us, and being committed to excellence. If we spend our time in that manner, then we'll both be successful during the coming year. As a guy once said, I'm not where I want to be, I'm not where I ought to be, and I'm not where I'm going to be. But thank God I'm not what I used to be. Thank you very much.